Simon, I found some drugs in Marcus's room.
What? That's not mine. You put that there to get me in trouble.
That's it. Your son's behavior is completely unacceptable. I already called the police to come get him.
I don't think that's necessary, Carla.
How can you put your wife and daughter in danger as your son becomes a thug?
Dad, you have to believe me that I wouldn't. Before I could defend myself from Bryn's lies, she added how I had assaulted her a few days back.
Get him out of here! He's dangerous!
The police came and picked me up that night, and I spent a few months in juvie. My name is Marcus, and for as long as I can remember, it's just been me and my dad against the world. My mom passed away when I was really young, so I don't remember her much. I just have distant memories of how much I loved her. My dad remembered a lot more of what she was like, and even though he tried not to show it, I could tell how much he missed her. I couldn't understand why he would be so lonely without her when he had me. I was just a kid at the time and didn't know anything about what it meant to be in love. I asked him one day, trying to understand. Dad, why are you still so sad when you have me?
I love you to the moon and back, buddy. But I loved your mother so much, and looking at you reminds me of her a lot. I'm not sad. I could never be sad when I'm around you. I just miss her is all.
I made a face at him. I still couldn't understand what he was talking about. He laughed at me and patted me on the back.
You'll understand what I mean when you get older. I know you were too young to remember much of your mom.
As the years went by, my dad was still as kind, loving, and supportive as ever. I began to understand how truly lonely he was. It stung because I began to feel like I wasn't enough for my dad, but I tried to look past that. This was about him, not me. My dad was the one person that I loved most in the world, and I wanted him to be happy. I talked with him about putting himself out there and starting to date again, so that he can find some of the love that he felt when he was with my mother. When I said that to him, he was so happy and beaming with pride. He told me he had wanted to get out there for a while, but he wanted my permission first. I happily gave it to him. Shortly after talking with him, my dad would go out on dates late at night. I was a little worried that he'd forget about me now that he was busy dating someone, but he never did. He was still the first one to show up for all of my soccer games and parent-teacher conferences. Before he would go on his dates in the evening, he would have dinner made for me to eat. Sometimes, he'd even bring me back food from the fancy restaurants that he'd take her to. I didn't ask any questions about her, and he didn't tell me anything. I actually kind of preferred it that way. This went on for a couple of weeks before he brought her home to meet me. I was surprised when they walked through the door, holding each other's hands. It was nice to see my dad happy with someone, but I began to get the sinking feeling that there wasn't enough love for both of us to share. Besides, didn't they just start dating? Isn't introducing her to me moving too fast?
Marcus, I know I've told you that I'm seeing someone, but I didn't tell you how well it's been going. I wanted you to meet your new mom. This is Carla.
My new... mom?
Hello, Marcus. Simon has told me so much about you, I feel like I practically know you already. I have a daughter around your age, so you'll have a new sister too.
What? My entire world was just turned upside down. I told my dad that he could date somebody, not get married. I wasn't ready for a new mom, much less a sister. I'd been an only child my whole life, with just my dad. I don't even remember what it was like to have a mom, and I'd never even had a sister before. I started to panic and sweat. How could he do this to me? I realized then that I was being selfish. My dad had done so much for me over the years, and had sacrificed a lot to keep me happy and healthy. Raising a kid on your own must have been incredibly hard and lonely. The least I could do for him was be happy for him, and not give him any problems for this new stage of his life. This is what he wanted after all. I wanted to be a good kid for him. I wasn't okay with any of it at all, but I smiled and hugged them both. Welcome to the family. Mom, I strained. That's where it all went downhill. The wedding was only a couple of weeks after I met her, and she moved in with her daughter, Bryn, days after that. It all happened so fast. My dad changed, too. He was such a lovesick puppy with Carla that he couldn't see how weird the whole situation was. He began to bark orders at me, telling me what I needed to do to make sure they were more comfortable in the house and helping them move in. They had so much stuff. He could have helped me carry in all that furniture that they brought with them, but he insisted that I was strong enough to lift it by myself and that he wanted to spend some time with Carla. I almost threw out my back with all that heavy lifting. The real problem that I had was with Bryn. Ever since she moved in, it was like she had a grudge against me that I didn't know about and did her best to keep me in trouble with Carla and Dad. She lied about me all the time to them. She made me out to be this dangerous person that I really wasn't. She would come home, telling them stories of how I had slashed someone's tire, how I had gotten into a fight with someone at school. She even told them that I stole money from my dad. Of course, she was the one doing all of those things and framed me for it. I couldn't understand why. I had barely even had a conversation with her since she had moved in. I defended myself as best as I could against her lies, but she had everyone fooled into believing her. I understood Carla believing her daughter over me, but my own father? How could he believe the word of this random teenage girl over his own flesh and blood? He hadn't even known her for a year. It was then I realized that the reason he believed her over me was because of how lovesick he was over Carla. It had made him completely blind. I had never had any behavior issues before, and he was so ready to believe all her nonsense. I began to think that my suspicions about her not being enough love to go around were right. I was heartbroken. I'd only ever had my dad for so long in my life, and he was my best friend. I wasn't about to let these random women that he met ruin our relationship. Carla and Bryn went out shopping one day, and Dad was alone with me. I decided then that I was going to confront him. Dad, you're being absolutely crazy. How can you believe two strangers over your own son? You know I would never do any of the things that Bryn is saying that I'm doing. You know me. It makes me feel like you love them more than me, and you just met them.
They're not strangers. They're a part of our family now, Marcus. I know you're usually a well-behaved young man, but a lot of changes has happened around here. I think you're just acting out. Boys will be boys and step out of line now and again.
But I'm not. Bryn is a liar, and Carla
divorced her last husband because he called Bryn a pathological liar, and I'm not going to make the same mistake as him. They're very sensitive about that. I don't want to lose Carla.
So you'd rather lose your son?
I don't want to lose anyone. Please just make this work, son.
So that's why she was always trying to get me in trouble. She was a pathological liar. I couldn't believe my ears. Even with that story that confirmed that Bryn liked to drive people apart, my father still stood by her, against me. From then on, I lived in a constant fear. I had no idea what she was going to do next. I did my best to avoid her at all costs. Her lies about me kept getting worse and worse until I realized that she was trying to get me kicked out of the house altogether. Carla would believe her lies every time and became more and more upset with my father for not being able to control me.
Mom, Simon, I found some drugs in Marcus's room.
What? That's not mine. You put that there to get me in trouble.
That's it. Your son's behavior is completely unacceptable. I already called the police to come get him.
I don't think that's necessary, Carla.
How can you put your wife and daughter in danger as your son becomes a thug?
Dad, you have to believe me that I wouldn't. Before I could defend myself from Bryn lies, she added how I had assaulted her a few days back.
Get him out of here! He's dangerous!
The police came and picked me up that night, and I spent a few months in juvie. It was absolutely horrible, and I spent most of the time crying. He finally chose them over me, and I was devastated. I occupied my time by writing letters to my grandmother, explaining to her what had happened. Luckily, she believed me and invited me to live with her when I got out. When she picked me up, she gave me the biggest hug and started crying in anger over what had happened.
Your dad was always too trusting of strangers.
When she drove me back to her house, I was shocked to find my dad sitting on the porch. He had his head in his hands and was crying.
I'm so sorry, son. Can you ever forgive me?
He explained what happened after I was taken away by the police. He knew Bryn had planted the drugs and had tried to convince the police to let go. However, it was his word against both Carla's and Bryn's. They both testified that it was mine. There was nothing he could do to get me out. He started being suspicious and hired a private investigator to do some background checks after Carla had divorced him. The investigator discovered that the two of them were actually scam artists and made money by getting Carla to marry and divorce men, taking all of their money in the divorce by lying about how much she had been abused. Carla was the mastermind, and Bryn was just the professional liar. They had plotted to get me arrested so that I wouldn't be able to testify in his defense in court. They had taken all of his money, his house, and his car. He was broke and penniless now, and had to live with his mother again. As he said this to me, he got down on his knees and had tears in his eyes. He grabbed hand and started sobbing.
But the worst thing that has come out of this was losing my son. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I love you so much. I should have believed you over those con artists.
Even though I was still angry with my dad, I could see how sorry he was. He meant this from the bottom of his heart. He did everything he could to get me out of juvie. He just got trapped with their lies at that point. I realized that he had learned his lesson, but more importantly, I missed having my dad around. Living with my grandma and my dad helped with him feeling lonely and less impulsive about dating women. He was careful from then on about who he dated. One night, the three of us were watching television on the couch and saw Carla and Bryn on the news. They had gotten into a bad car accident in the car they had taken from my dad in the divorce. Carla had become terribly disfigured after the accident and couldn't walk anymore, so she is stuck in a wheelchair. Bryn's pathological lying got her in trouble with the police since she used to telling lies. Her story of what happened in the accident didn't match up with anyone else's, so no one believed her. She's currently in the psych ward because they think she suffered some sort of brain damage. Their misdeeds finally caught up with them. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel.